very lucky to have with us this evening 3 of the most talented Grand Canyon artists in the country. They are well known for their work. And what's really nice is they really love the Grand Canyon and they want to be here with us this evening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read their bios that they provided, and then we have some questions that they're going to answer. And then we're going to open it up to you, so if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask them some questions this evening. So with that, to my right here is Bruce Aiken. After 33 years of living in the Grand Canyon, Bruce Aiken, who now lives in Flagstaff, he's had long study of the canyon and is a muse and model. Whether focusing on the big view, the more intimate view, or drawing inspiration from the surface of a piece of shale, he literally leaves no stone unturned in his quest for more canyon secrets. With Serena Suplee here in the middle, surrounded by 2 handsome men. Serena Suplee has been painting the Colorado Plateau for more than 30 years. She paints watercolors on site and draws detailed sketches which she transforms into large oil paintings. She was honored to receive the Jack Dudley Purchase Award in 2011 at the Celebration of Art, and now has a painting in the Grand Canyon Association Permanent Collection. Serena paints annually at Phantom Ranch and creates a collectible t-shirt designed for them. She is first and foremost a river woman. Serena was the featured boatman of Grand Canyon River Guide's Boatman's Quarterly this spring, telling her the story. And that was the first fully colored illustrated issue, too. Peter Nisbet, officially P.A. Nisbet. P.A. Nisbet has been painting the Southwest for nearly 40 years. He first visited the Grand Canyon in 1970, and since that time he has floated 15 trips down the Colorado River and hiked throughout the canyon interior. He prefers on-location painting as a prelude to larger, more finished studio paintings. One of his major pieces is part of the Grand Canyon Association Permanent Collection that hangs at the Colt Studio here on the South Rim. You'll be able to see that painting when you come to Colt Studio on Saturday. So are we ready to do our questions? So this is the fun question here. What makes painting in the Grand Canyon unique compared to other landscapes in the Southwest, and why is it so challenging? Bruce, you want to start?
The Grand Canyon is an incredibly complicated subject that does not allow the viewer, whether the viewer is an artist, a photographer, or a regular guy, an opportunity to take it in as a whole. It is so complicated that literally takes a lot of effort to even begin to understand this subject.
Why don't you grab the mic out of there? Go ahead.
I was going to actually answer just like Bruce. It's so complicated, and that's what keeps it so interesting forever. It's like the feeling that you never quite get it, so you're going to try again, and then when you go to try again, you discover another whole thing. So you're never done. And how fun is that?
Yeah, complicated. For me, that means vertical depth, horizontal depth, 180 degrees down, all the way up to the sky, all the way east, all the way west. 1 million bits of color, 1 million different forms, unbelievable shifts of weather that change those colors as they dance on the forms. And that's just what you're looking at. And now you've got in front of you your blank canvas. And your job is to concentrate all of that infinitude into a 9 by 12 or 12 by 16 or whatever size canvas. Concentrate that whole thing into that in a period of 2 hours. 2 hours because the sun is moving and the shadows are moving, and if you stay longer, your shadows are going to blur across the canvas. So, and then all the colors you have on your palette, and then you have the problem of transferring opaque paint pigment and turning it into light, like it looks out there. So, literally a million different decisions that have to happen in a very short period of time. And it's the greatest landscape in the world for that reason, and it's intimidating.
Does anybody want to add any more? Okay, all of you who are on this panel are very experienced and have made extensive physical journeys throughout the canyon over the years. How has this experience influenced your work? Got the mic.
I think it's about that living in the moment. Each moment is different. Every time you come to the Grand Canyon, you see something different. So it's influenced my life by knowing, like Peter was talking about, how you have this 2-hour period where it looks like that. And to be focused in that moment, in that 2-hour period, or maybe it's only 30 minutes because the light was at such a place where it changed faster. But I think the Grand Canyon has helped teach me to live in the moment.
I certainly feel like the canyon forced me to become more disciplined with my work. Previous to that, I probably was thinking in a more free way, free association with whatever it was that was entering my mind. But the canyon, I think, really made me go to a very disciplined approach to overcome, as Peter so eloquently put a moment ago, the intimidation factor of the Grand Canyon is as high as you can imagine anything to be in terms of intimidation. So the canyon affected me to become a more disciplined artist.
I would agree, discipline's really required. And for me personally, the canyon required me to get physical. And no other landscape, short of some places down in the Sonoran Desert below the border, have I been forced into taking physical risks in order to penetrate the place and bring something back that I can transform into a painting. It's extremely physical, and it was physical for Moran, and it was physical for Gunnar Woodforce and all the other greats that were here before us. And so when we walk it and when we run the river, we're partaking in a kind of ritual in that we are experiencing the place the way our forefather artists experienced it. And there's a kinship that we feel to that is profound. And it's very, very meaningful for me personally to connect up to that. And when I'm working on canyon pieces in my studio, it sometimes is very emotional. The place is deeply felt, I know, for all three of us.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. So this is a fun question for this evening. Why is the Grand Canyon Celebration of Art important to you?
Well, I'll pick it up since I have the mic. This morning, while I was working on the rim, a lovely couple came up to me, and they were interested in what I was doing. And I got into a conversation, and I showed them what I was doing. I actually got my fingers in the paint and really got personal with them and shared with them what I was trying to achieve. And I could just see the light in their eyes. They loved it. And so, in a way, this experience here with the Grand Canyon Association gives me the chance to be an ambassador for art. And people who aren't painting really don't know what we're trying to do. And it's a wonderful thing to cross over and share that, and that gives me a lot of personal pleasure.
For me, it's seeing all the different people coming to the Grand Canyon to rejoice in its beauty, and all these people that are interested in art and the expression of the beauty of the Grand Canyon, and all the different ways that can be done. So just sharing in beautiful beautiful art and the beautiful canyon.
I would say that in 1970, when I came up to the Grand Canyon really to live, there were no other artists here at that time. Mostly people still talked about Moran, Thomas Moran and Windforce as being the important people. I felt like I'd walked into a vacuum artistically. Now, here it is, 2012, very long time after 1970, and literally there are thousands and thousands and thousands of artists who are understanding now that this subject is worthy of a lifetime of study, if not a large portion of their time to study this amazing subject. So the celebration of arts now, I think that the floodgates have been opened in recent years. Even as recently as 20 years ago, I mean, everybody that was painting the canyon knew each other, seriously. Nowadays, there are so many people painting the canyon because the floodgates have been opened and the lid has been ripped off, and artists now know this is some serious business here. So this celebrates that spirit.
Thank you. So, Serena, if you paint on site at the canyon, do you always use photography in your work? And can the canyon be well painted using photography and or memory without plein air experience?
Well, for me, as soon as I graduated from NAU in 1981, I knew I wanted to be a painter. I was trained to copy photographs so that the lighting was just right, and I got pretty bored with that for myself. It wasn't creative enough, and even my graduating exhibit at NAU, my professors were not quite pleased because I didn't go by the rules that they said. And anyway, when I got done, after I graduated, I gave my camera away, and I told myself, I'm really going to learn to draw. And I am only going to paint what I can draw. And the better I get at drawing, the better I'm going to be able to create a really great painting. So for me, I wanted to, at that point, I knew I wanted to create my own style, my own way of seeing, my own way of doing it all. But I also know that it's really hard work, and with photography, it gives you a guideline so that you can create a masterful piece by the record of having the lighting just right, and then you have a guideline to go by. And me using my guideline in my sketchbook, I can also kind of figure out where all the dark shadows go, because by the time you get to that spot, sometimes you need to go back to your drawing to remember how it was 45 minutes ago. And so I have that basis of my drawing to go back to. And do you really need to do plein air to be a great painter? I don't know. I'm sure there's been great painters that never did do that. One of the things I watched not that long ago was the Ken Burns series about how the national parks were started, and one of the things that was so amazing to me is the woman who advocated for the Everglades to become a national park never even went there. And yet she had a heartfelt feeling about that place that was so strong that she was able to manifest it becoming a national park. So I think we all have our own path.
I learned to paint copying photographs in National Geographic at age 6. And I got pretty good at it. And I thought I'd made it. I mean, I thought if you can do this, you've got a great life. It took me maybe 3 or 4 years to start tiring of it and asking the question, why why not just take the photograph? Why copy the photograph? And so after a number of years, as a young person, I started going outside and painting, and that transformed my whole worldview. And so I would say plein air is absolutely necessary, and for me personally, it's a requirement. Yes, I do use a photograph. I saw light coming and going this week that happened in split seconds. Without a photograph, I can't freeze that moment as a memory to even use. So at least I have the tool available. I know that Leonardo would have loved a camera. So it's okay. Camera's okay, but you can't be ruled by the photograph. You have to transform the thing. You have to make it your own. And the way you do that is you go out in the space, you experience it, you spend several hours trying to paint it, and when you finish that, and you finish 4 or 5 days of doing that, the scales come off of your eyes and you begin to see the world in a different way. And it is that sight, that newfound sight that was hard-earned, that you take home with you to the studio. And it's that combination of memory, and months go by before I'll attempt to finish painting. Memory, the photographs for reference, and the field sketches all come together in the studio to create something entirely different. And so, yeah, I think all of those things are part of our work kit. And I don't have any hang-ups about the photograph. I just don't want to let it rule me, that's all.
You just mentioned something, Peter, that I totally agree with. I mean, if Michelangelo was alive today, he would have 2 of the best Nikons you could get your hands on. There's no question about it, because the camera is a tool that virtually every modern artist uses in some fashion. I was on a river trip with the Plein Air Painters of America, whatever, about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and you know, they were talking about just plein air and how important it is, and it is. But suddenly, when that fleeting light that Peter was just talking about showed up on a butte or a temple, cameras came ripping out of backpacks and everything, and click, 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 click. So it's a tool. It's a tool that artists in the modern era use. And it's a great tool, and if you become a slave to it, that's going to show in your work. I guarantee you it's going to show in your work, and it's going to look like a bad photograph. So that being said, I like to make drawing the foundation of my art, and without a proper, skillfully laid out drawing that shows composition, that shows tonal differences, structure, values, all of those things. I don't think I've even begun to get to the place where paint even is going to be realistic to me. But as far as understanding light and color, that takes serious outdoor study. And I use pastels when I'm outside, not oil paint. And I do a small rendering in pastel, usually no more than 8 by 10, possibly 11 by 14, something like that. But that then might go back to the studio with a black and white drawing and whatever photographs I may have taken as prop. And then the oil painting comes from that in the studio.
Thank you. Thank you. So here's a good question. River, rim, or inner canyon, which do you prefer painting?
They're all good. Every one of them. Every one of them are good, and any artist that is not using all 3 has failed. What was the question?
Which one do you prefer?
I said they're all good.
He loves them all, Helen.
The question was, river, rim, or inner canyon, which do you prefer painting? He likes them all.
I like river, but it's mostly because then I have all my stuff really nice and handy, and I also like looking up. And it's not to say I don't like looking down, but I like river. I just like the way it feels. I like listening to it. River is neat.
For my own part, I would have to say I would vote for the river if I had to, only because the river is a metaphor for your life. You start at the top, and once you push away from Lee's Ferry, that's it. You're going whether you like it or not. But more importantly, the light comes in and hits the walls. And if you're in marble, which is my favorite part, it hits the red wall, and then it bounces down onto the river, and then it bounces back up on the other wall on the opposite side and fills the shadows with orangey light, and then it escapes back into the sky. And so it's like a ping pong ball bouncing all over the place. And the effects that it creates are unearthly. And so for us, we get lost in it. And
So 4.5 million visitors come to Grand Canyon every year. Less than 1% go below the rim. So Bruce said something to me was very interesting earlier this year. Most of the visitors here for Celebration of Art are only seeing the canyon from the rim. So kind of explain that rim painting, how it is that you can capture the rim. It's a little easier to paint, I believe, from the river looking up versus from the rim looking down. But that's the view that most of these people are going to see, even though we're inviting them to step down below the rim. So it'd be very interesting to hear your perspectives on that. So we just went off script, but I think
the
it's
difference
really important.
between rim and river is what you're asking?
The importance of being able to paint on the rim.
Yeah, well, of course, for me, with an eye at the past, looking at Thomas Moran's work, which mostly is from the rim, although he has plenty of pieces from river in Kanab and up in Zion. And the rim is very different because it's highly atmospheric, and there's not a lot of structure above the horizontal line unless you're doing clouds. So a lot of us are bringing our horizon up higher on the canvas so that our eyes are focusing down on the structure. And we're using shadows to help define the shapes of the structures. One of the interesting things you can do is get on the trail and drop down a quarter of a mile and get that rim higher up. And then you begin to see the buttes and mesas taking on their own forms. But from the rim, it's a straight line, and you have to deal with that straight line. And myself, I prefer to put clouds in and get clouds going in there. We all do it differently.
It's true. Thomas Moran put clouds between the different side canyons or scallops, or between the different rocks and pinnacles and things. I think when I try to do it, I try to just make it a lighter shade as it goes farther back. But the rim is really challenging because there's not as many different lights bouncing around like down in the canyon. But it's also, I do enjoy putting the north rim in, when you're on the south rim, putting those last two, the Kaibab and the Coconino, and their trees often will make a really nice background for anything else. And make whatever's shadowing them will make whatever's in front of it pop a little bit more to create a really interesting composition. Yeah, and I guess when I'm on the rim, a lot of times I think about, I'll find something just way down there and I'm really, really interested in that. And I'm never quite sure how to just pick that one little spot and know that it's just one little spot in this whole big realm. And I think if there's anything, I really have never quite gotten that when I'm doing a rim picture, that it doesn't feel like it's right across from me, which it isn't, it's way below me. So that's, I think, a tricky thing is showing that it's below you and not just in front of you when you're trying to paint it. I think it's really challenging.
Yeah, the rim is more challenging than the river,
It is.
in my view. It's the ultimate view of the canyon. It's the big picture.
It's the big picture.
It's the huge, it's the whole thing, and it's the most complicated aspect of understanding and viewing the canyon. I mean, that's the view most people get when they first see the canyon, is from the rim. And that's why it's so overwhelming. It literally takes your breath away, because seriously, how many things really can be applied to that phrase? Oh, it took my breath away. Well, did it really? Well, a lot of people that come up to the rim of the Grand Canyon for the first time, they are definitely stunned and seeing it for the first time, especially as an adult, where you can take this in and your mind literally reels, trying to find a reference point of what is this that we're looking at, and your brain is saying, no reference point, no reference point, no reference point. That's what takes their breath away, because it's so unique. Let's see, there's nothing else like it on the face of the planet. I think I heard a couple of important politicians say that, and it's actually true. There really isn't anything else on the face of the planet that even remotely looks like it. It's so big and deep. So all that being said, painting it from the rim as opposed to the river is a whole nother ball of wax. But when I got here a long time ago and started painting the canyon, I wanted to do the whole thing. I mean, the whole thing was pulling me. So yeah, I painted from the rim, but that wasn't enough. I painted from the Tonto Plateau. I painted from the top of the head wall. I painted from the boulders in the Coconino Sandstone. I painted from the inner gorge. I painted from the river. I painted from the trails. I painted from the north rim, the south rim, the east rim, the west rim. The whole thing. Of course, that took over 30 years to even begin to understand it. So whatever it is that, I mean, if the artist really wants to understand and know more about the Grand Canyon, sure, start on the rim. And the river is beautiful, it's seductive because of the water, but painting on the rim is by far the hardest thing. It really is.
Relate the most memorable experience you've had in the canyon.
Well, for me, that was probably when I was 4 years old, the first time I saw it. I never forgot it. It impacted me in a major way. I saw the canyon as a very, very young kid, and was with people that knew about the canyon and made a big deal out of it, and it impressed me in a major way, and it doesn't surprise me that I spent my entire adult life and professional career studying it.
I think for me, my most memorable moments are when I'm along the river and I have those smells and that sound, and I know I have all day to just relax and paint whatever bubbles up in my brain. And I guess that's where I started actually painting the Grand Canyon, was at the river, because I was a river runner before I really got into the whole big picture of it. And from the river, I hiked a lot of different places from the river up. And then as I started to spend more time on the rim and come from the rim down to the river, and I too have done a lot of stuff from the Tonto. I love the Tonto view, where you've got the, a couple layers below you, and then you have all that above you. It's actually in some ways the most ultimate place to paint is on the Tonto. So in a way, it's been different for me because I started at the river and worked my way up.
I know this guy named Dave Edwards. A lot of you know Dave Edwards. He looks like Teddy Roosevelt, and he acts like him too. And he's done 180 trips or 200 trips as a river guide down the river. And when he first asked me to go downriver, he said, "Pete, why do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I want to learn how to paint the water in the canyon." And Dave said, "Fine." And I never heard another word. until we got to mile 217 on my first trip with him. And I was sound asleep. It was 4 a.m. The stars were out, and dreaming something wonderful, and this heavy weight fell upon me. I was sleeping on the beach, and I woke up startled, and hovering over me is Dave Edwards. And I threw the weight off, and it was a wetsuit. And he said, J.M.W. Turner was lashed to the mast of a packet boat in order to go out in the English Channel and take the waves directly, which made him the greatest painter of water that ever lived. You're going down the river without a boat, and you're going to find out what the rapids are all about. That's Dave Edwards. He's not here, so I can work him over. Love him dearly. So, I put the wetsuit on. I sat in the boat, shaking like a leaf, and as we slid down into the Tonga mile 217, which you could swim back in the old days if I had that mile right. And he said, see you later. And I jumped off, and I slid down this beautiful, slick, glassy tongue, treading water, and so forth, and then I hit the first big wave. And I didn't quite get my breath right, so that when I went through the wave, I swallowed a bunch of water. And then I came out into the air, and I had about 2 seconds before I hit the second big wave. And then I took in another half gallon. And by the third wave, I was ready to drown. I was ready to go down. And there he was, in the boat, in a keeper, little Eddie down there waiting for me. And they dragged my dead body out of the river and pulled me on board. And that was my greatest, most memorable experience.
So I think if you guys are okay, we'll do one more question, and then we'll open it up to all of you if that works. So many of you have mentioned Thomas Moran and Gunnar Woodforce, but who are the canyon painters of the past that you most admire, and why do you admire them the most?
Well, Thomas Moran, of course, he's admirable. But Woodforce was an artist that really woke me up in terms of, this is a guy that figured out some things about the canyon that Moran didn't figure out, including how to draw a picture of the canyon correctly so that you could stand on his spot where he did the painting and go, oh yeah, he's on Hopi Point, looking east, of course, and it's morning, you can tell. Moran didn't do that, but Woodforce did. And then also Woodforce got a color scheme and a palette that, to me, today, still is the best palette ever laid out for the Grand Canyon, consistently correct. So I admire him, but in modern day, Merrill Mahaffey was a guy that I looked up to early in my career, back in the 1970s, when I was a pretty young guy. He was already here doing the river, painting on the river. He didn't much paint from the rim, but mostly from the river. And I saw what he was doing and was impressed by that. I also think that Wilson Hurley was a really, really good painter of the Grand Canyon, and I wish that he'd been able to do more.
Well, I'm with you. Gunnar Woodforce he got the palette, he got the colors, he got everything in the right spots. He's got the bushes where the bushes really are. I often kind of fake it myself. And I think he's the main one for me. I studied, there's a historic book that was published in 1969 by the Belknaps, and I was fortunate enough to borrow a copy of it for a year, and then I got paint all over it, and had to buy one to replace it, which was very expensive. But I think I learned more from him than anyone else. I, too, actually studied under Merrill and visited his studios, and he and I always talked about doing a river trip together, but he immediately liked me because I was already a river girl. And then actually, Bruce, you were the other one who influenced me. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to defend Tommy Moran. Imagine coming out here on horseback or on train, and there's no Nikon in your hand, just a sketchbook and a set of gouache, watercolor, and you proceed to do the most exquisite aqueous medium renderings ever done of the Western landscape, ever. And I've gone so far as to look at his drawings and comb the place, looking for the place he painted. And I can't find it anywhere, and no one ever will, because he was an inventor. He invented the place. He invented Yellowstone. They made a park because of him. People come to see Artist Point because of him. And the reason is because he turned the optical reality, what we would call today the photographic reality, he turned it into spectacle. And the way he did that was he moved millions and millions of tons of rock at will with his brush to suit his creative genius inside that rectangle I was telling you about. And I don't think, and I mean, Gunnar Woodforce is fabulous. I'll take nothing away from him. I love his stuff. It's beautiful. He does composition like nobody's business. But Tommy Moran, even though they're fantasies, a lot of them, they capture the total cosmic phenomena that you experience when you dig deep into this place. You come away breathless from Moran because he really got it. He really knew it. And he was doing it from his imagination pretty much by the time he got home into his studio. And his foregrounds are superlative. No one has ever painted foreground rocks with the authenticity and the creativity that Moran did. They're absolutely astonishing. So I love Thomas Moran. He's my spiritual granddad. I love him very much. I know a lot of others do too.
You all mentioned the complexity of the Grand Canyon and what a challenge it is to paint it. And Bruce, you commented that 20 years ago there were 20 painters and now there are thousands upon thousands, I think you said. Is the Grand Canyon at risk of being overdone? And if not, why not?
Boy, that's a great question. I don't know whether I could even answer that question for sure, and when I said 20 years ago there were 20 painters, I mean facetiously. I don't really know, but it seemed to me though that nowadays there's so many painters that have jumped onto the Grand Canyon curve, and it's great, and I love it, and I think it's a beautiful thing. But one thing is for sure, the visitation to Grand Canyon National Park still remains over 4 million a year, and that'll probably continue to slowly rise over the course of time, like it always has. So, that being said, who are these new visitors? Well, they're new people that haven't seen it before, and at some point, the three of us aren't going to be here anymore, and the other artists that are in the crowd aren't going to be here anymore, and 100 more years will go by, and we'll just be ancient history stuff. So the population of the planet continues to grow, so maybe all those things, work together to create the whole. So as far as it being done as a subject, probably not. And there is so much to know and still know about the canyon. And believe me, I've tried. I have really, really tried over the course of my career, that I spent most of it in the canyon trying to find more to see and know about this place. And I'll never ever even begin to know. So I think that's what's probably going to be happening, is more and more people will be finding more and more things that haven't been seen before. And not just a view of a scene or a place in the canyon, but aspects of the canyon that still haven't been discovered in a creative way, including light, subject matter, rocks, time of year, time of day, all of those things can still be explored.
Please.
No, I was just going to add, I'm not too worried about thousands of painters coming here because they're going to find out the hard way.
Absolutely.
You know, this place weeds out the people who aren't up to it, believe me. There'll never be that many really good Grand Canyon painters. It's just too hard.
It's too hard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh boy, everybody's waving.
As one of those drawn here to express it in her own way, can you each provide a suggestion on how we can capture what's one good piece of advice that we can take with us when we go out there to do this thing we're trying to do?
Joe Campbell once said, follow your bliss. So I say go out there and observe, observe, observe. Don't be in a hurry, take some time. Hours, let hours go by looking. And what is yours that belongs to you and your psyche will come forth in that process. And as that happens, you will begin to know what you want to do with it. You have to allow yourself the opportunity to see into it.
Yeah, if I was to add anything to that, is your eyes will just tell you, or you'll know what your eyes are attracted to, and that's where you want to be. And then you'll be attracted to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and pretty soon you're doing the whole Grand Canyon. I guess, so, Bruce?
And also, I might add, years. And I'm serious there because once you've come back 3 years in a row, I don't know how many times you've been to the canyon. I don't know, and I mean, I apologize for not knowing, but I can tell you that if you come back 3 or 5 years in a row, you'll begin to see things again and recognize and know again, oh yes, I remember this. This was good. And then go deeper into what you think you already know. And when you go down in, and I mean into the subject, not literally into the canyon, but you can go into the canyon because that is the next step. And always go deeper, literally, emotionally, creatively, mentally. There's always more, and that's what it takes, is the time to actually achieve that. So it's time.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming. The artists will be here if you would like to ask them questions. We also have some of the artists here from the Celebration of Art. They're wearing their name tags. So if you have any questions for some of the specific artists, please stay and talk to them. I also want to show you that we've got a display. We're really getting sophisticated here. We have Celebration of Art merchandise. So we've got some special limited edition things there on the table just to show you, and those will be available at the quick draw tomorrow.